was to cement the ties between Han and Tibetan peoples, which he did by marrying the Tang Dynasty princess, Princess Wencheng. Today, Tibetans live in a land where past and present merge. From traditional yak butter tea to international fare, religious paintings to postmodern art, it's a bizarre mix unlike any other. But one thing that's unchanged is the spirit of the people. In Shannan, the birthplace of ancient Tibetan culture, there stands the first palace built by the first Tibetan king. That was in the 2nd century. The Yongbalakan Palace is the oldest surviving example of Tibetan architecture.
Wow. Look at the crops over here. These were where the first Tibetans settled over 2,000 years ago. And you see, it's believed that they came here, had a Tibetan king, and built their first palace. Maybe that's why this area is so sacred.
Legend has it that the original ancestors of the Tibetans were a sacred monkey and a mortal woman. Over the centuries, their descendants multiplied and formed a tribe and turned the valley into agricultural land. After the first king descended to earth from the heavens, he was followed a little later by the first sacred text, which fell on the roof of his palace. Buddhism made its way into Tibet from India, and the central figure is Sakyamuni, the founder. Still today, a sign of devotion among Buddhists is to recite the sutras, spin prayer wheels, and offer yak butter lamp for the oil lamps. The Yongbalakan Palace, geometric in shape, was the model based on which many other structures were later built. There's something magical about the towering place, perched on the mountain beneath the clouds and brilliant sun. Indescribable. Tibetans live in compact communities on this plateau, making up 95% of the population. The natural environment is harsh, temperatures are cold, and oxygen is deficient. But for these farmers and herdsmen, the most important crop is barley and their agricultural lifestyle. This site, covering almost 4 million square meters, is the celebrated tomb of Tibetan kings. Among those buried here are Songtsen Gampo himself, along with his wives and concubines. The tombs are flat on the top and piled with earth and rocks. Tibetans live in an area with an extensive river system and vast lakes. Naturally, they have learned to use these waterways as a means of transport. By tradition, small boats made of animal hide were used to cross those rivers. Although today's boats are a bit more sophisticated, the journey is no less difficult. Samye Monastery, built in the 8th century, was the first monastery in Tibet. It was commissioned by an Indian Buddhist master and combines elements of Han, Tibetan, and Indian architecture. And thus, it's called the Three-Style Temple. It's one of the most popular destinations for pilgrims, some of whom travel on foot for weeks to reach it. Ground floor is Tibetan, middle floor is Han, and the top is in Indian style.
Sanya Monastery is particularly famous, mostly because of its grand scale and also its position as the oldest and earliest monastery containing all three religions. And you see, the name in English sort of translates into the unimaginable monastery. And that's because when it was first being built, it was unimaginable how huge this place was. And also, after it was being slowly constructed, it was being taken down by the demons every night. But somehow, miraculously, it still came to be what it is today.
An air of mystery surrounds Samye Monastery, enhanced by its grandiose and complex design. It's supposed to replicate the universe as described in the sutras. 4 towers, each of different color, stand at the 4 angles of the main temple. They symbolize the 4 heavenly kings, who are said to protect and bless the monastery. The monastery's interior is large and colorful. It's a place where many monks come to study. But there's one room we're not allowed to see. It's where monks of the highest standing spend 3 years studying the scriptures, and they don't come out until their time is up. Food is delivered to them regularly. Here, the wall paintings are most informative. For instance, this one displays the rules of the monastery. They're quite particular about the types of shoes allowed inside, also the type of kettle used for carrying the water, and the rules for praying. A daily ritual for monks is debating the Buddhist scriptures. It's a way for the novices to learn. The debate also serves as a test by which a ranking can be drawn up of how much the monks have mastered the rules of the Buddha.
It's the beginning of a brand new day today in Tibet. And you see, many people call this place the roof of the world. And why not, with an average height of over 4,000 meters above sea level. And they always say, you get the best view from above. Let's see how these Tibetans live their lives. I'm Yin, and welcome to Travelogue.
Tibet is a mysterious land, and its capital, Lhasa, is its spiritual center. Lhasa in Tibet means place of gods, and indeed, it has been a destination for Buddhist pilgrims for centuries. People from far and wide journey to the center of Old Lhasa, its heart, the Jokung Monastery. The monastery was constructed by the Tubor king Songtsen Gampo in the 7th century, and has been the oldest temple in Tibet. When Songtsen Gampo married a Nepalese princess and later a Chinese princess, Princess Wencheng, they both brought sculptures of Sakyamuni, the founder of Buddhism. The king then ordered the Jokung Monastery to be built to house these holy sculptures. Nearly all Tibetans follow Tibetan Buddhism, known as Lamism. Buddhism was introduced into Tibet in the 7th century from India. Today, the power of religion still runs strong, and people gather outside the monastery every morning to prostrate at the main gate. By doing so, it's believed they collect good merit for the next life. I have never seen more devout peoples anywhere in the world. The Jokung Monastery can claim to be the center around which the city of Lhasa developed. With the growing number of people circling the monastery, prostrating themselves, the most representative Barkor Street was formed. Today, Tibetan people still follow this custom, moving clockwise around the monastery every dawn and dusk. It appears the street still whispers the stories of old Tibet. Nowadays, Barkor Street is also a hive of market activity in which visitors can buy all sorts of souvenirs.
See, this piece of cloth is a typical costume for what the local ladies wear. And you see, I got one myself here. It's double layers, red on the inside and blue on the outside. And it's things like this that keep you cool in the summertime and warm in the winter. Look at the embroiders.
Most items on the street relate to the religion, since religion plays a role in most aspects of Tibetan culture. Tankas are the richest forms of Buddhist art. Tanka is a kind of scroll painting mounted on fabric that depicts a wide range of themes taken from Tibetan history, social life, and traditional culture. The main theme of Tanka is religion, and portraits of Buddhas and religious scenes are common.
Contemporary Tibetan art. Wonder what that looks like.
The Lhasa of today is a blend of past and present. Art has taken on a new face in art galleries on Barkor Street. Contemporary art includes traditional religious themes blended with abstract or postmodern ways in presentation.
Art in Tibet. What does that exactly mean? Well, typically people will think of the tankas or the murals that are on top of the monasteries and the rooms and the walls. But nowadays, you see painting in Lhasa has taken almost a different type of turn. There's many different faces to it. And around me now is a perfect example of what's modern here in Lhasa. You see, instead of just the two-dimensional, very brightly colored pictures of Buddhas or things from the scriptures, now you still have sometimes the same content, but it's displayed in a completely different way.
For a taste of local culture, you gotta try local foods.
On this section of Bajiao Street, there's all these daily food items that the locals eat. Like, see over here? This is sort of dried yak butter. And over here is shredded. All different shapes and different widths and everything. And I guess the people here like to have their yak butter in all different forms, with their foods, with their yak butter tea, and everything else.
Most Tibetans still prefer to eat traditional foods. And the Majiami restaurant on the street can be just that place for you. It's a fine place for a good view of the city as well. You haven't been to Tibet if you haven't seen the Potala Palace. In stories and legends, we have heard of the holiness and mystery of Tibet, and perhaps it stems from this ancient palace. Its crimson and white wall and its golden roof shine in glory in the famous sunlight of Lhasa.
The signature structure of Tibet is, of course, the Potala Palace. And you see, millions of people come here every year to witness its grandeur. It stands over 110 meters in height and has over 1,000 rooms. Formerly used as government offices, now it's mostly admired as a religious and historical center.
In 641, Songtsen Gampo, ruler of the Tubo Kingdom, had the Potala Palace built for Princess Wencheng of the Tang Dynasty, who he was soon to marry. The complex is made up of two sections, the Red Palace and the White Palace, which together consists of 1,000 rooms. It's a model of Tibetan architecture and a major national cultural monument. This world's highest palace stands more than 3,700 meters above sea level and has 13 stories with 999 rooms.
You see, the Potala Palace is composed mostly of two colors, red and white. Now, of course, they're symbolic. The red symbolizes power, and the white symbolizes peace and tranquility, just like the palace.
Much remains veiled to the visitor, like the stupa of the 5th Dalai Lama, who rebuilt the palace after it was damaged by lightning and warfare. At 14 meters high, the stupa has over 3,700 kilograms of gold. The designs and decorations are all inlaid with diamonds and pearls, as well as other precious items. The White Palace, comprising halls, temples, and courtyards, serves as the living quarters of the Dalai Lama. The Red Palace includes various chambers for worshipping Buddha and chambers housing the 8 stupa that contain the remains of 5th through 13th Dalai Lama.